What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. We just a couple of hours ago had the First Descendant Season 3 Episode 2 December update preview, which was another hour and 50-ish minute sort of like walkthrough of everything that we can expect for the patch for the First Descendant, which is on the 4th of December, so literally like a couple of days from now. There's quite a few things in this update. It's not as big as I would say like the updates that we see at the beginning of every season or the big parts of the season, because it definitely seems now that we'll be seeing pretty much every season being split up into 4 episodes or 4 parts or 4 quarters, whichever way you want to look at it. But I thought I'd quickly just run you guys through this to give you sort of like a summary of everything. I do these with every one of these patches because these shows could be quite long, because of course there's dual languages and everything happening like that, and they're trying to cover like all this stuff so that everybody understands it in their native language. And it does blow up the show a little bit. So just some highlights, essentially everything that we saw here. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here, some things which I think people are really looking forward to, myself included. So let's dive right in. So the first things first, of course, the new Ultimate Descendant we're going to get is Ultimate Yujin. I would say there's a subset of players who are diehard Yujin superfans and who really enjoy this Descendant, and so I think for them this is a pretty much a really a dope set of news right here. The new design looks pretty awesome. They also do mention that some of Yujin's skills have been reworked for the normal version of Yujin, as well as of course Ultimate Yujin, but more importantly we basically have 2 new Transcendent mods which have been added, which kind of like push Yujin's power level, I think, quite a bit up. The first one that they showed was something called Combat Protocol, and this basically uses your HP to then buff your skill-based attack. So this kind of like seems like the one that you would use to mob and to sort of like play on your own and to deal damage. So you've got like a drone that comes out, and this drone drains your HP but then deals damage. The higher you stack your HP, the lower your cooldowns are, which means you'll be able to push out your skills more often and everything like that. This does seem really cool, and as somebody who was late to the party on Yujin but actually ended up liking him a lot, this is pretty damn cool. Most recently in the patch, Yujin's skills already received, I believe, some form of a buff already. So he's kind of like in a good space right now, and I think this trend is going to continue on with Ultimate Yujin. So yeah. The second one that they showed is Battlefield Medic, and this is more like the group play, kind of like if you're running with other people and you're doing content with them. What this is it basically not only buffs your allies, but in buffing your allies, the more allies you buff, the more buffs you yourself get as well, and the stronger you become as well. So basically you have levels of buffs like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, that the more people that you buff, and by buffing I mean like healing people and applying some of the other buffs, you can actually raise allies' stats and things as well. And in doing so, you actually buff yourself as well, and then you're able to push out more damage as well. So kind of like the 2 sides of the coin here. I would say Combat Protocol is probably going to be more useful and sexier if you are running by yourself, and then Battlefield Medic is pretty much right there in Yujin's identity of like basically being like a combat healer and then like running with people. Then we do get ourselves another content island as well. So the new dungeon, the new infiltration dungeon that's being added is Forbidden Sanctuary. Essentially, this is also going to be considered difficult content. It's going to be the new area, most likely. Ultimate Yujin's parts will come from this, as well as some of the other things that we're going to be seeing later on in this video that we're talking about that are being added to the game. And so this is pretty much like the new dungeon that you're gonna it's got a very organic sort of look to it, the enemies. And I gotta say, some of the enemies look, I would say, pretty much probably in line of like with the super massive dungeon, the most recent one that was added, which is pretty difficult. And if you're somebody that struggles with action planes and stuff like that, then these dungeons are really quite tough, and you kind of like really have to show up with a Descendant that's reasonably well kitted and well built out to deal damage. And at the very least, building like I, for example, who tend to build very much like paper mache, like glass cannon Descendants, that is something that you have to like play around, or you just need to stack yourself some HP, which has become a lot easier with things like Ancestors modules and stuff like that, and being able to just juice more out of your modules on your Descendant. But nonetheless, this is the new one. So this is the Forbidden Sanctuary, which you'll be able to join as like an infiltration dungeon from like the normal menu. Of course, a new patch also means that we are getting a new Void Intercept boss. This is interesting though. This boss is the Grim Reaper, or just Grim Reaper, and it's modeled after Deathstalker. Deathstalker, notoriously back in the day before Abyss Void Intercept bosses existed, Deathstalker was the most difficult boss to fight, and kind of like you could only do it in a group, and obviously if everybody in the group wasn't pulling their weight, then you would kind of like have an issue. So this is a boss that is modeled after the Deathstalker, so you see a lot of resemblances in terms of like the skill usage and basically the stuff. This also means that this is a toxic attribute boss, which means the boss does toxic damage to you, but that also means that this boss is weak to electric, so expecting, you know, things like lots of bunnies running around and, you know, something like that. So pretty much this boss is going to be the new one for us to fight. From a mechanical perspective, everything, they've mentioned that this is a boss that they've tested extensively because they want people to feel like the fight itself is very involving, I guess, if I can put it that way. What I mean by that is that you know, there's things on the floor that you have to stand in, and you have to like activate buffs and avoid debuffs and, you know, that sort of thing. So I think it's like the idea here being like trying to move away from just opening your gun up on the boss, killing them, and then walking away with loot, which is a complaint that people sometimes have with these bosses, saying that, you know, like, I want it to be a little bit more than me just coming in and mag dumping on the boss's face and then the boss is dead. But no, it looks interesting, it looks cool. At the very least, I always like fighting the Void Intercept bosses. Some are more fun to grind than others, for sure, but we'll give good old Grim Reaper a try when we can. Then, as no surprise to anybody, Bunny is basically getting her own external component set. The set is called the Sprint Accelerator set, and pretty much is built for her. So it activates based on like if you maintain speed above a certain speed, and then it increases your electric power, and it actually gives you MP regen as well, which is pretty much exactly for her. So I mean, Bunny is in a way kind of like the mascot for the game. She's the ultimate descendant, as well as the descendant that's been given away the most free, and you kind of like see her in a lot of the material and everything like that. Like I said, she kind of like seems like she might be the spokeswoman or spokesperson or something like that for the game, so kind of makes sense that she would get her own set. I don't know if this is indicative of a situation where we end up down the line where every single descendant eventually gets a set that's kind of like very much tailored for their skill usage and stuff like that. You kind of like see that in some ways already now, at the very least. Like you've got like sets which specifically match toxic characters and so on. But yeah, this is the first time that I've actually seen a set that is specifically targeted at one specific descendant, so that's interesting. We also do get some new trigger modules, 3 in actual fact. So the first one being something called Infected Weapon. This is very much for descendants that have a unique weapon effect, so think something like Freyna. Basically how this works is Freyna puts dots on enemies. These dots cause something called an infection, and when an enemy has an infection on them, then your unique weapon does increase skill damage to that enemy. So really cool, actually. Freyna's getting a lot of love this patch because she's also one of the descendants that's getting reworked or rebalanced or basically buffed, right? I mean, they say rebalanced, but generally it ends up being buffs. So this is a thing. So then we also have something called Ground Eruption. This is very much catered for Valby. They also showed it in the screenshot. So this is when you have ground dots. These dots will deal increased damage. So in other words, her water that lies on the ground. And then this will also make that deal more damage against tougher enemies. So think like elites and Void Intercept bosses and bosses in general. So something where she's really, really good at killing trash, but her damage falls off ever so slightly. And let me just be clear, I said ever so slightly because her damage is still fucking ridiculous against like tougher enemies, whereas this trigger module will now obviously, you know, keep that from happening. Then the last trigger module of the 3 that they showed was something called Instant Acceleration. And this kind of like works around the thing that certain skills as well as modules and whatever stuff in the game, there's things in the game that can cause you to have your movement restricted or movement restriction. And so this will then increase your movement by a certain percentage if you have an effect like this active on you. So basically to keep you from getting slowed down. How I understand it is this would mean that something like Haley, who slows herself down with one of her skills, this will then counteract that. But I mean, whether it's worth it to lose out your trigger module to not necessarily dealing more damage, but just being able to be more mobile, I don't know. I guess we'll see. But yeah, let's wait and see pretty much how this thing works out. Then we have some new melee yellow modules. I think there's more than 4, but the screenshot showed 4. These are quite spicy looking if you're into melee weapons, the swords and stuff like that. These seem like really good additions to the pool of modules. So again, these alongside the 3 new trigger modules, alongside the ultimate Yujin parts and all of that, will probably all come from this new dungeon that's being added, the Forbidden Sanctuary. All right. Then we get to the rebalancing for this patch. As usual, there is a fair amount of rebalancing happening. I think the primary focus for them is Ajax. And so Ajax is getting pretty much like the Lepic treatment, if I can put it that way. Meaning like we're getting a rebalance of the skills and everything like that, but we're also getting a rebalance of the Transcendent modules, all that. So it's like the whole package is getting reworked. They also do mention that there are some other Descendants who are also getting a pass, namely Freyna, who I mentioned already before, Valby, and Viessa. So Viessa also recently did get a buff, so it's interesting that they're throwing some more stuff her way, but that's really cool. And then actually they're starting to now do passes on weapons as well. So they mentioned TDA, Truly Deadly Arson, Fallen Hope, and Hive Master is getting some adjustments. Hive Master makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like not fucking great, so it kind of makes sense that they would be messing with that and kind of like making it better. They do also mention that there'll be more of these coming down the line, so I think it'll be a staple from now on, that while like we see the adjustments being done for the Descendants, we're also going to see that happening on weapons and stuff like that. You know, a couple of weapons and a couple of Descendants at a time. Then there is some, as they say, gameplay improvements, as they've mentioned. And basically what we're talking about here is like ancestral module trading is coming in now. All right, now that the trading system has been tested for a while, we have some drop improvements that they mentioned there. We have the special skills of the melee weapons, which are getting buffed, it seems. And we have the Devourer, the Void Intercept boss that's being added to action planes and stuff. So there's a couple of other things. There's some graphic improvements and things like that that's also mentioned. But yeah, just in general, kind of like just some additional, you know, changes and things like that that they're making in the background. And then of course we get the 2026, as we are now standing at the end of 2025, we get the 2026 roadmap. And there's actually quite a bit to unpack here. This basically, you can see here that we have season 3 episode 2, which I believe we're currently in, and then we have episode 3, which is going to be in February, and then come May we're going to have episode 4 of season 3, and then eventually summer, which is I guess like what, June, July, somewhere around there, we are going to see season 4 episode 1. Okay, so first of all, with January we're getting breach tracking field, we're getting a balanced pass on Enzo, which I'm sure will, you know, make some people happy. We're also getting monthly balanced weapon improvements. As I said, we saw 3 weapons being buffed now in this week's patch. There's probably going to be more of these coming, so yeah. Then the big one in February, episode 3, the new Descendant is Dia, or Dia, whatever. We have the operative directive system. We have arc tuning mutant cell system renewal, which means, you know, some changes being made to that. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. Legion Lab Dungeon, Onslaught Mode Beta. Onslaught Mode is a big thing that's launching in May, so they're going to start betaing it out in February. Most likely we'll get a chance to look at it beforehand and see, you know, what it looks like. There's also something called Research Time Boosting Event, stat info display improvements, Descendant mission dashboard, Undersea Base Dungeon, second boost pass. So the first boost pass was earlier in this year, which basically allowed people who just basically started out the game to essentially jump forward and blast their way through normal difficulty almost instantly, get to hard difficulty with a ultimate Descendant in hand and a bunch of like materials and stuff like that that they can use to sort of like bring themselves up to current speed. As the game progresses like this and we get deeper and deeper into the power well, events like this can be quite important because of the fact that, you know, like somebody who starts the game out brand new has a massive amount of effort in front of them to be able to catch up with somebody that's been playing from like launch or something like that, which in some cases makes sense, right? Because you got to reward the guy who spent like 2,500 hours versus the guy who spent like 1 hour. Fine, sure. But at the same time as well, if it's about people playing together and everything like that, then that's a pretty massive rift to cover. So yeah. There's also a new weapon and modules, and then they continue on with the monthly weapon balancing and Descendant improvements, as well as the Void Abyss monthly rotation continues on through all the way to May. May is episode 4, where Onslaught Mode officially launches. We have difficult Void Intercept boss renewal. So this is the hard Void Intercept bosses that they've said that they've wanted to make a plan with these to make them viable to do again and everything like that. So that seems to be coming our way in May. We also have a new Void Vessel dungeon, fuck my life. We have optimization setting option additions. We have ultimate easy mode dropping during that time, as well as more weapons and modules. And then the summer, again, like I said, I guess that's July, possibly August, something like that. But June, I guess, would be too early if May is episode 4, where we have Carol's final battle, which is a mega dungeon that's coming out. Then we also have a new dungeon system. We have Transcendent weapon release, okay? And then we have a new Descendant. We have Ultimate Haley, and we have the main story overall. Main story overhaul, okay, first of all, Ultimate Haley, fuck yeah, let's go. And then main story overhaul here, the way that I'm understanding this is exactly what I said just now about people having to go through normal mode to get to hard, which is like essentially visiting each biome / locale on the map and then following like through the missions and essentially doing the story of the game, which people tend to, especially people that are trying to get to hard difficulty, tend to fucking rush through this as fast as possible. So I'm wondering whether they're gonna either streamline this or make it simpler or make it shorter or something like that. But there's a lot of effort that they spent on this content, so I don't imagine that it's just something that they're just gonna, you know, fucking throw away, because that would also be a terrible waste. So yeah, there's also a bunch of cutscenes and stuff in there, which are at the very least very good for pulling screenshots off of, as your characters wear all their different, you know, outfits and stuff like that. So yeah. But that's pretty much the patch notes update in a nutshell. Of course, we don't have the actual patch notes yet. That we will have on like fucking Thursday, or yeah, Thursday morning or something like that. So expect another video to go through the actual patch notes itself, where we can look at things like values and all of that shit, because those are usually quite interesting as well to ascertain just how much of a buff certain things got. But that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below what thing about the patch on Thursday excites you the most. I suspect it's going to be Ajax fucking update. It's going to be Ultimate Yujin probably for some folk. And yeah, I think some of the, like the set for Bunny, there's a whole bunch of people that enjoy playing Bunny, so that's going to be awesome as well. So yeah. But let me know in the comments below what you are excited for. I'll see you in the next video. And as always, fucking cheers.